Our guest today is a loyal and dedicated City Club member. He was recently named publisher of the Chicago Sun-Times and chief operating officer of Hollinger International. He and Michael Cook, the editor-in-chief, make a great team. He honors us today with his presence as we celebrate our centennial anniversary and a century of civic leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, the publisher of the Chicago Sun-Times, John Cruickshank. John?
Thanks, Jay. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the tremendous friendship and support you've always shown me, my pal Michael Cook over there, the editor-in-chief of the Sun-Times, and all of our colleagues at the newspaper. Your regard for our coverage of the politics of the city, the state, and the nation, and of the contributions of such Sun-Times writers as Steve Neal, Fran Spielman, Scott Fornick, Lynn Sweet, among many distinguished others, makes us all proud. And I want to thank you, too, for welcoming me here to the City Club. These meetings provided a crash course in the past, present, and future of politics and public policy in our city and in our state. And it's also a great forum for staying in touch with the city's insiders and all the talented outsiders working hard to become insiders. Congratulations to you and to your volunteers and your paid staff for all you've accomplished. You've made the City Club a vital civic institution, and I'm honored to speak here today. Some people have said to me since my appointment, it's a shame I've been asked to become publisher of the Chicago Sun-Times and the chief operating officer of the Chicago group of newspapers during such a difficult period for our company. And there's no question that the owners of my newspaper have had a really ugly run of bad press lately. But when people say that, I just laugh. I mean, when do guys like me get a chance to do these jobs? Well, it's only when the other people are too smart to take them. So I see this as a wonderful opportunity to bring a different kind of focus to the Sun-Times and our other newspapers. My predecessor was a business guy, and he dropped in here between trips to New York and Palm Springs and Toronto and Vancouver. Well, I live downtown. I've got a son at high school. My wife's the editor and assistant publisher of North Shore magazine. We love this place. We love its energy, its excitement, its size, its opportunity, its civility, and its promise. And I want that pride that I feel about being an adopted Chicagoan, an Illinoisan, to be reflected in the Sun-Times and in our other suburban titles. I want to be sure that the good and the bad, the accomplishments and the challenges of the community that I've come to love are fully mirrored in our papers every day. Now, this group knows above all, the newspapers have to be watchdogs. They have to be critics. Those are key social roles that we play. But if that's all we are, if all we do is sit on the sidelines and complain about how poorly everybody else is playing the game, we'll go estranged from our communities. In extreme forms, journalism's dogma of objectivity can just be an excuse for indifference to moral choices. I don't think our newspapers should ever be even-handed in the treatment of good and bad, or good and evil. Important civic institutions shouldn't be in the hands of people who don't want to make a difference with them. If newspapers aren't willing to campaign to better their cities and towns, to advocate good causes, and put some of their muscle behind them, they'll lose an important aspect of their public purpose, and they'll lose the love and attention of their readers. I'm not promoting boosterism here. I mean, boosterism is harmful because it doesn't discriminate between good ideas and bad ones. But there are thoughtful forms of public journalism that I think are good for communities, and I believe good for the relationship between newspapers and their readers. And you'll hear more about these issues from our editors in the days to come. Well, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on the bottom line, as my predecessor did. I'll bring a greater emphasis on enhancing the quality of our titles into the publisher's office. Now, many of you know I've inherited what's a journalist's nightmare. We're making the news instead of covering it. We've been on the wrong side of the microphones and the cameras and the steno pads, just waiting for the next blockbuster story about us to appear. I mean, we're on the front of the Wall Street Journal this morning, on the front of the Chicago Tribune, again. And there are investigative reporters in North America and Great Britain sifting through every public filing our firm has ever made to any regulator in the Western world or beyond, looking for dirt. And there's no question when the scent of scandal's up, the staff wonders, did the cost of the owner's jets, the management fees, the multi-million-dollar non-compete payments depress our wages? Is that why there's so little authorized overtime? Why there's so few overseas trips? Is that why we're not going to get cushy new offices in the Trump Tower? Well, they're tough questions. For anyone who's been through any of this, you have my heartfelt condolences. There may even be people out there who think it serves a media company right to have to face the wild baying of the press pack mad for blood. It's certainly instructive. You reflect a lot on the quality of your own coverage when you're being covered, and it's good for your humility. But it's also frustrating. The Sun-Times and our other suburban titles are in very strong shape right now. We have been virtually unaffected by the tornado that's ripping through our corporate offices. Because we hunkered down during the toughest days of the economic slump, we're poised to do extremely well in the recovery. We're ready to make new investments in editorial and marketing and to undertake some creative risks that weren't realistic before. And it's hard to get that message out over the noise in the media and the marketplace about the owners of the Sun-Times. Though for those who have not read the story so far with as rapt attention as some of us who are in the eye of the storm, let me give you a quick review. Our newspaper and its sister publications are owned by a publicly traded Chicago-based operating company called Hollinger International. Hollinger International is a very solid firm with valuable newspaper assets. It's controlled by a flamboyant Canadian-born newspaper entrepreneur and a celebrated biographer of Franklin Delano Roosevelt named Conrad Black. Within the last couple of years, Conrad has been elevated to the British House of Lords, and so he's known to the Queen and the Society magazines these days as Lord Black of Cross Harbor. Well, Black, with a small group of associates, including the former publisher of the Sun-Times, David Radler, have spent 35 years building an international newspaper company. It includes titles that, as the Telegraph Group in London, Daily Telegraph and Sunday Telegraph, the Jerusalem Post, as well as the Chicago Sun-Times and our sister papers in this region. Over the last half dozen years, the news for us in Chicago has been almost all good. Our parent firm has put $125 million into a new printing plant for the Sun-Times and built up an impressive network of suburban newspapers. We now publish more than 100 dailies and weeklies and a couple of magazines in and around Chicago. Included in that number are the many titles of Pioneer Press in the north and northwest suburbs, the Daily Southtown and the Star out of Tinley Park, the Post-Tribune of Northwest Indiana, and the Fox Valley group of newspapers with daily publications in Joliet, Naperville, Elgin, Aurora, and Waukegan. The story for Hollinger International shareholders, however, has been a little less inspiring. In the past 5 years, the company has only provided shareholders with a total of $23 million in profit. And during the same period, Mr. Black and some of his partners have received more than $200 million from the company in salaries, management fees, and non-compete payments. During the same 5 years, Hollinger International shares have slumped in value, while other publishing shares have risen 17% at Gannett, 20% at Knight Ridder. So some months ago, one of the largest of the minority shareholders of Hollinger International went to the Securities Commission and claimed Mr. Black and some of his associates were improperly siphoning off value from the company, and they demanded that the company investigate the complaints. Acting on the complaint, the company created a special committee of the board under outside director Gordon Paris and a former chairman of the SEC, Richard Breeden. 2 weeks ago, the company reported that 4 officers of the company, including Mr. Black and Mr. Radler, had received millions of dollars in unauthorized payments in the course of the sales of several Hollinger International properties. Following that disclosure, Mr. Black stepped down as chief executive, and he retains the title of non-executive chairman of the company, and he remains the controlling shareholder. And Mr. Radler left the firm altogether. Mr. Paris, my new boss, has been appointed chief executive, and he'll run the company at least until the investigation is completed and a decision is made about what Hollinger International's new directions will be, there is the possibility that our company and our newspapers here will be sold. My senior staff and I have already met with a team from Lazard Frères, the investment banking firm that's been retained to advise the directors of Hollinger. If the company is sold, it might be transferred as a single unit, or it could be broken down into smaller components. If our Chicago papers must be sold, my preference would be to hold the Chicago group together. I don't think we've really begun to explore the potential for quality improvements and business enhancement possible from working more closely together. That said, the alternative wouldn't be a disaster. Each of these smaller companies are quite capable of standing on their own feet to produce good newspapers and reasonable profits. Our friends over at Chicago Crane's Business Magazine last week ran a well-meaning column about how sad it would be if the Sun-Times folded during this difficult period. The columnists essentially argued that the city badly needed a second fiddle in town to keep the Tribune on its toes. Now, the truth is, and you know this well, the Tribune's so fat with ads it hasn't seen its toes for years. But that's a talk for another day. Anyway, this column was written by a lovely kind of newspaper romantic, a concerned guy who used to be a senior editor at the Tribune, and needless to say, he's not really in touch with the economic realities of newspapering. I was a little surprised to find this stuff in a business magazine, but as I said, being the object of coverage is both intensely instructive and good for your humility. The truth is that as long as investors are interested in profits, the Chicago Sun-Times and Hollinger International Chicago group of papers will not be going out of business. We have revenues, thank you. We have revenues in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and a modest but acceptable percentage of each dollar in revenue falls to the bottom line. And the 1.6 million readers who see us every day don't think of us as a second paper. They see us as their paper. According to the organization that measures newspaper readership in America, the Sun-Times has a substantially larger readership than the Tribune in the city of Chicago, and indeed throughout Cook County. There's no question that the Tribune, with its dominant home delivery circulation in the communities of the North Shore, has overall a more affluent readership. And especially on Sundays, the Trib has a more lucrative advertising base. But if you lay the readership of the Sun-Times over the population of Chicago and Cook County, what you find is that we look a lot like the community we live in and that we cover. A friend and colleague of mine told me after I'd been here a while, she really hoped I could fall in love with the Sun-Times because it needed people to love it. And my history of with newspapers is in papers a lot more like the Tribune and the Sun-Times. And the Sun-Times and I were a tough fit at first. Well, that's another reason that we've been so lucky to have Michael Cook here. He has none of my reserve. Michael's never met a newspaper he couldn't fall madly in love with at first glance and create great romance with. It happened more slowly with me. It started when I began to understand how much we mirror the city and the region at our paper. That really brought home to me how vital it is that there be a strong newspaper here to give voice to all the citizens of Chicago. We have a representative sampling of most of the region's demographic groups among our readership. Half our readers live in the city, half our readers live in the suburbs. We're the first paper for newcomers because we're easy to handle and we tell stories dramatically. We're a magnet for young people, and we get them to read because we care about popular culture and sports and life after 6 p.m. And our pages aren't always dominated by pictures of white guys in suits. About 1/3 of our daily readership every day is African American, and we're intensely proud of our success in serving the community. We have a rising Hispanic readership, an important percentage of blue-collar readers, a growing number of business readers since Dan Milley took over our business section, and we've got every reader in town who's really interested in politics. Because if you care about who's running your city and your state, you've got to read the Chicago Sun-Times. This is an intensely competitive newspaper market. I mean, we say it's a two-newspaper town, but in fact, the Daily Herald circulates in the suburbs. Our own Daily Southtown has great strength in the South, and the city's ringed with dozens of other dailies and weeklies. Besides that, you can get home delivery or newsstand copies of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, almost anywhere. There's tremendous consumer choice. So you have to be very committed to your readers to win their commitment to you. We have an advantage during the work week with our compact format. We're a lot easier to rate it on the train or on the L than our competitors. But we lose that advantage on the weekends, and we haven't really figured out yet how to keep all our weekday readers as loyal to us on Saturdays and Sundays. Our rivals over at the Tribune have been very aggressive lately. They've launched a Spanish language daily, and they started the Battle of the Reds. I admit I'm not thrilled about the Reds from a business standpoint, but I have to tell you, as a newspaper lover and someone who cares about the vibrancy of the community, I'm delighted by it. I'd like to acknowledge the Tribune's creativity and their energy these days. It's great to see. The daily street battle between the Trib's red eye and our red streak has been wonderful fun. And newspaper wars of whatever kind are always good for readers. Competition draws newspapers closer to their customers. Newspapers pay close attention to their readers and advertisers when somebody's lunging at their throats. It's just that kind of business. The Tribune, of course, launched Red Eye because they were having trouble getting younger people to read their main paper. And we launched Red Streak to stop the Trib from taking young readers away from us. I think we made it very difficult for the guys in the tower to execute their business plan. They aren't actually selling many of their Red Eyes every day, and the city's flooded with free copies of both Red titles. But they've got deep pockets, and there's a bus shelter ad campaign running for Red Eye now, and they've got ads all over the television stations they own, and I see their delivery vans everywhere. I keep hoping that they will go back to tormenting the Daily Herald with new suburban editions. But it seems that they're determined to play downtown. Makes it a challenge every day, but those challenges are far outweighed by the opportunities and the joys of running a newspaper in this community. Let me also say, I'm sad about what's happening in my company right now, but I'm also really proud of what our management team has been doing to deal with those issues aggressively and publicly. And it's only because Hollinger International transformed itself in the face of criticism, creating an internal investigation, that these unauthorized payments have come to light. I mean, can you imagine how hard it is for a company to censor its own owners and operators on behalf of the shareholders? So I'd like to acknowledge the tremendous role that's been played by those folks and by our new CEO, Gordon Paris. It's a job of a lifetime for him. And this one is a job of a lifetime for me. When I leaf through our pages, I see ads from the swankiest Michigan Avenue shops and from the local pizzerias in the far-flung suburbs. When I sift through our readership reports, I see a reflection of the city with all its vitality. There's nothing ordinary about Sun-Times readers. Even in Sundays, which is in some respects our toughest day, we have over 1.5 million readers, and 1 million of them are university educated. And that's not just a reflection of a great newspaper. It's a mirror of a great city and a great region. So I'm confident that whether we're sold or whether we're not, we're here to stay as a vital strand in the social fabric of this place. I think we've got great newspapers with a great future. At the core of them, the core of them all, is the Chicago Sun-Times. And long may they all serve the people of this city and this region. Thank you.
There'll be a few questions as long as you're not a interview reporter. Step up to the mic, and Bruce Knoll did leave a camera, so all you who stood up, except from employees at the Sun-Times, it is now duly noted. State your name and your question.
Joyce Saxon on the board of the City Club. Mr. Cruickshank, in view of the vague but consistent threat of terrorism, do you really think it's a good idea to build a Trump Tower on the banks of the Chicago River?
Well, you know, the original plan for the Trump Tower was to make it the highest building in town, maybe the highest building of its kind in the world. They scaled that back after 9/11, and I thought that was very sensible. This is a slightly squatter building, but still very beautiful in design, and I think very much less a target.
Let's hope so.
Some people on the left-hand side of the room are relieved. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Mike Gonzalez, City Club member. I grew up as a young man selling newspapers. in a paper stand. I remember the real red streak, sold the green streak. So my comment is on, or my question is on that. Do you feel it's a quote, as it's been perceived or portrayed as a dumbed down version, and do you think that's good? I mean, I see it being read in my office, the younger folks, but do you think it's a dumbed down version?
Well,
And the financial
Sure.
viability going forward?
I think that you have to distinguish a little bit between the Trib's red eye and our red streak. The Trib's red eye doesn't bear any relation whatever to the Tribune broadsheet newspaper. I don't think it's dumbed down. I think it's an attempt to do something very, very different. I'm a little appalled that they're getting the Audit Bureau circulation to allow them to count sales of red eye as an edition of the Tribune. I just don't think that's right. I don't think it makes any sense. It's counterintuitive. Ours is a little closer. Red Streak is a little closer to our daily paper. Both of them have made a very conscious attempt to be a lot more colorful, a lot edgier, but we're doing them on the cheap. I don't see any way for either of these publications to make money in quite a long time. So I mean, there are compromises on quality I see in both of them. They're an interesting experiment. I'm delighted that the Trib has dragged us into this fight. I don't know that this will work, and I don't know that it's a good idea to try and niche. The one thing that I think is, the greatest strength of newspapers is that they create a mass market. They create a place where very large numbers of people come every day to engage in a kind of daily conversation. They can do that through the letters. They can do that through conversations they have at work or at home about what they've read. It creates some commonality in what we know about ourselves and our communities. And when we decide we're going to take a little niche away and create something new for some group that doesn't tie with all of the other groups, then we take away from the commonality that's a possibility. So there's some really interesting questions around the Reds. I think they've done it largely as a business proposition to try and deliver some more numbers, especially younger numbers, to advertisers. I don't know that it will succeed.
Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 on Channel 21, CAN TV, and in 34 suburbs. Check your local listings. Next week's show, 6 of the 7 Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate.
Is there a question?
Here's the question.
You can advertise in the red.
I'm looking for that applause line. I got one. Following my fearless leaders. Okay. Two newspaper town. But I wondered about the benefits of two-party rule in the city of Chicago. You heard the discussion earlier this morning, and it sounded like some of our panelists were suggesting, in terms of stability and otherwise, there have been great benefits to Chicago of having, at least for the last 50 years or so, single-party rule. And since Paul Green admonished me not to talk about some people, I would say, at the risk of mischaracterizing them, Phil Ponce, Steve Neal, Bruce Dold suggested some of those benefits, at least I heard that, of single-party rule. And I wondered if you could comment on, is it possible that if we had two-party rule, or we had two parties in the city of Chicago over the next 20 years, that the city of Chicago would be even better than some of the people suggested it has been in the past? And two, could you give some advice to the Republican Party, since how would they go about resurrecting the Republican Party
Gosh,
in the
Jeff,
city of
you're
Chicago?
leading me a long way astray from what I came to talk about.
I understand.
But
That was because Paul Green didn't let me ask any questions earlier, so I had to do it now.
Would you like to call Steve Neal back up to the podium?
Come on, give us a shot. You can do it.
Well,
The Sun Times is a lot better shape than the Republican Party.
yeah, we can say that. Listen, two-party rule, absolutely, we're for it. We have been since our founding a pro-democracy party. Right? We don't believe in one-party rule. This is not Rhodesia. And I think what you were hearing this morning was not about one-party rule, was the benefit of stability, where there really was a coalition of citizens behind someone who they felt, strongly about, felt strongly they were making a difference for the city. And I have no advice for the Republicans. They're on their own today.
John, you get, for that stellar performance, and you get a mug. Dan Miller, you could see you can go out there and you could raise money this way in case things get really bad. But I do want to thank you. That was a great speech, and we seldom get standing ovations, and that was one. And it just wasn't your employees. So congratulations. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause. Before we adjourn, I just want to say that, real quickly, that when you look at what we did today, and when you look at our Millennium thing back in, at the Historical Society a couple years ago, and you all have a copy of the book, and please take one. Jim Mariner never showed up. I told him it was a good book. He could show up, and he autographed him, but a former Chicago Sun-Times employee. There really isn't another organization anywhere, not only in the city, but I was talking to Don Miller, probably not many places other in the country, that can do this thing continuously and have this kind of education, a little fun, and we all could learn. So Jay Doherty really deserves a great deal of credit for making this the premier public policy, not only a forum in the city, but probably in the nation. And I think all of us are benefiting from it. And it's just a lot of fun to be here. And if you're not a member, $50 and you pass all the requirements. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you soon.